The 4 uncommon truths of organizational leadership. If you're a manager or executive, I like to use the term organizational leader, who's serious about your career as an organizational leader, and who feels a certain amount of responsibility to your employees to try to bring your A game to this leadership role. And if you have even a little bit of what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset, then you're likely to get a lot out of these 4 truths. First, as an overview, the names of the 4 truths. Number 1, the reality. Number 2, the cause. Number 3, the solution. Number 4, the path. Truth number 1, the reality. Organizational leadership in today's fast-paced, ever-changing business environment is challenging. It's really tough. My research team and I have documented hundreds of these challenges in my many books and websites, so I'm only going to give a nod to them at a very high level in this video. It's really useful to divide organizational leaders' responsibilities into 3 dimensions. They go by many names, but in this video I'm going to refer to them as planning, teaming, and executing. In the planning dimension, you're trying to analyze complex situations and understand the risks and opportunities and figure out what your team, I'll say your organization, should do. You have to make sure you're solving the right problems and pursuing the right goals and trying to get your stakeholders aligned and in support to have enough organizational commitment to the strategy and the plan, and finding the resources you need, and trying to get more leverage out of the resources you already have, and making sure you have the right people taking responsibility for these objectives and these strategies. And I haven't even mentioned the dozens of important decisions you need to make every week. Not easy. In the leadership dimension we call teaming, you're trying to keep your employees engaged and your team members motivated, often under difficult working conditions, with a lot of your teamwork actually taking place now in remote or hybrid working environments. Leading teams has always been hard, but now you're doing it on a computer screen. We complain about video conferencing, but for some of you, that would be a luxury to be able to see and talk to the person on video who's just barking orders or complaining or whining or being passive-aggressive in your Slack channels. So all the stuff that's always made leading teams hard, things like enough feedback or poorly offered feedback, personality conflicts, disengaged and unmotivated team members, is now 10 times harder across computer screens across time zones. Not to mention all the different cultures and mindsets being poured together into the melting pot or cauldron, you might say, of team leadership in today's organization. Not for the faint of heart. Finally, in that 3rd dimension of leadership we like to call executing, man, for many, this is the hardest and in some ways the most important. You're responsible for making sure that your employees and teams actually perform, actually meet the expectations that have been set. And you have to find a way to get people to take some responsibility and initiative, and you have to hold them accountable. Oh, and then there's delegation, the lost art. I meet very few leaders who aren't struggling with some aspect of this complicated beast, delegation. And I haven't even mentioned the need for productivity, to stay focused on the highest priorities each week in spite of hundreds of distractions and dozens of competing commitments all vying for your limited attention and energy. It's kind of exhausting just thinking about all the things you're responsible for and all the pressures that are on you. But this is what you signed up for when you accepted the role. The occupation of professional management is tough. And then layer on to that, not just being a decent manager, but trying to be a good leader for your employees and your teams. Let's just say it's a lot. You're only human. At times, all organizational leaders can feel a bit intimidated, and if you don't, then you might not be aware of the real risks and what's at stake. And after a while, that constant pressure to perform can feel a bit overwhelming, and the constant demands for your energy can feel a bit exhausting at times. As they say, the struggle is real, but that's actually not the end of it. That's just the beginning. As a committed, responsible leader, as a confident achiever and a learner, you look for advice in books, leadership courses, or training programs, or for well-meaning but all too often ill-equipped executive coaches. What you mainly get is a confusing and contradictory mess of bogus advice that mainly amounts to lame lists of leadership qualities and character traits that do nothing at all to help you elevate your leadership skill and performance. And most of the advice out there is not contextualized in terms of which people those methods will actually work with and which circumstances they should be deployed in. Most advice out there mainly amounts to idealistic, out of touch, impractical, and often vague one-size-fits-all notions that in truth are really just projections of unconscious bias of the advice givers. In other words, the type of leaders they prefer to follow, with little to no regard for your unique situation and the needs and preferences of your followers and your team. Truth number 2, the cause. If you are like the vast majority of organizational leaders that I've met, then you have listened to some of that ubiquitous, bogus advice, and you're probably pretty misinformed about what leadership actually is. Further, if you're like most managers and executives I've met over the last 20 years, you may even be doing certain crucial aspects of leadership wrong. Yeah, I said it. You are probably doing some important aspects of leadership wrong. I'm going to let that sink in for a sec. It will be to your great benefit in your career as an organizational leader to have someone who can give you that kind of honest feedback. I hope for your sake I'm not the only one giving you honest feedback. But it's not your fault, and I'll explain why. You see, you've been misled by well-meaning but unqualified leadership advice givers. Leadership as a field has many problems. Many experts have suggested that the leadership development field has largely failed. These serious issues with the ineffective methods that most leadership trainers and coaches use have been the subject of numerous books, including several of mine. Leadership advice, as it is typically offered, is contradictory and confusing, and in most cases, pretty useless. A lot of research published in recent years suggests that the majority of leadership development programs do not produce meaningful improvement in leadership performance or organizational results. That's because leadership isn't actually what most leadership advice givers think it is. In fact, most leadership trainers and coaches can't answer even the most basic questions, such as what leadership really is, how it really works, and how to develop it. Leadership has very little, if anything, to do with character traits, or leader qualities, as they call them. There are several reasons for this, which I detail in my books and other trainings, but the short explanation is that different types of followers and cultures put totally different qualities on their lists of effective leadership qualities. In other words, different types of people and teams actually define effective leadership in totally different and, mutually exclusive ways. There's no single list of leadership qualities that will work with all types of followers. As you'll learn, there are 4 different leadership paradigms and approaches to leadership, and they must be paired correctly with the right people and circumstances, or they tend to backfire on you. Plus, lists of qualities or character traits are worthless anyway because you can't learn a character trait. I'll explain. Leadership is a complex skill made up of numerous sub-skills, and each of those sub-skills is made up of specific techniques. So any advice that doesn't give you the specific technique to use to build specific leadership skills will do little, if anything, to help improve your performance. Lists of qualities and vague concepts are next to worthless when it comes to improving leadership performance. Truth number 3, the solution. So that's all the really bad news. Here's the really good news. Even though most bogus leadership advice givers don't recognize leadership as a complex skill and don't offer the specific techniques and tools you need, we do. Even better, after more than 20 years training and coaching organizational leaders, we know the 80-20 of leadership techniques. That is the 20% of leadership behaviors and activities that produce 80% of the results. We call them the Pareto Principle practices. Also, we provide specific, easily observable benchmarks to help you assess the skills you already have down pat and don't even need to worry about. And then you can hone in on the handful of leadership skills that you still need to improve to reach your full potential in your career as a corporate leader. Also, as I implied earlier, the real reason that there's no single list of effective leadership qualities that has any merit at all is because, in truth, there are four very different and mutually exclusive leadership paradigms, you can say leadership styles, and they all work with different people and will backfire with other people. If you use the wrong leadership approach with the wrong follower, not only will it not work as advertised, worse, it may actually undermine your leadership credibility, causing you to look clueless or even foolish in the eyes of your followers. Once you recognize which leadership paradigm works with which followers and teams, your leadership credibility and influence and your leadership performance skyrockets. Truth number 4, the path. There is a way to rapidly elevate your leadership performance and organizational results. It's called practice-based leadership development. And it's also called integral leadership development because it applies integral theory and integral psychology to leadership development. We literally invented both practice-based leadership development and integral leadership and have been teaching it for 20 plus years, and I've written a bunch of books on the subject. If you approach leadership as a complex skill that it is, and if you break that down into its component parts, things start to come into focus real quick. And that's what we do. We focus on the skills, the thinking, the behaviors, the specific techniques that the best leaders, the most successful leaders know how to do. Our goal is to help you reach your full potential as a leader in your career as a professional manager. Our mission at the Integral Leadership Academy is to democratize quality leadership education. Our long-term vision is to disrupt the bogus leadership development industry with our vastly superior, integrally informed, practice-based method of leadership development. Let's get to work honing your leadership skills so that you can become the respected, impactful, influential leader that you know you are meant to be.
If you want to learn more about the 3 abilities of leadership and the 3 skill sets that comprise these abilities, you can pick up my Integral Leadership book available on Amazon, or better yet, consider enrolling in my Integral Leadership program at Integral Leadership Academy. We are now accepting applications to register for our latest and greatest 5th generation Integral Leadership program, including self-paced, live instructor-led classes, as well as group and one-on-one coaching options. Message me for details or visit our website at integralleadershipacademy.com.